June Hollis reckoned the whole pit crew's tab in her head before the clerk found the crank on his machine, and her boss told her to keep to the trays. She didn't argue. She just set the tray down level. Then, Dorsey reran the tape aloud, loud enough to call her a cheat, and the machine landed on her exact figure. Harlan Prewitt, in front of 40 Saturday regulars and 11 greasy crewmen, she's a tray girl, Ardmore, nothing more. Across the gravel lot, the driver everyone came to see set down his cola, walked to her counter, and asked her one question about numbers. If you've ever been told to keep your head down when your head was the sharpest in the room, this story is for you. Subscribe and comment the town you're watching from. I want to see how far June's story travels. The Starlite Drive-In sat off the county road 2 miles out of Cutbank, and on a good Saturday, it looked like a little city made of headlights. June Hollis worked the trays there. She had worked them for 3 summers now, and she was 22. And she could carry 4 plates on one forearm without a wobble. She wore the red apron the way some women wore church clothes. Neat, pressed, a stub of pencil sat behind her ear, worn down to almost nothing, and she never once used it. She didn't need it. That was the thing nobody knew. A carload of boys would call out an order all at once, talking over each other, and June would stand there with her hands folded and let the numbers fall into place behind her eyes. 2 burgers, a fish plate, 3 colas, a shake, onion rings, and a slice of pie. She'd have the total before the last boy finished talking. To the penny. Tax and all. She'd say it once, quiet, and turn for the kitchen, and by the time she came back with the tray, the total was already true. Folks thought she just had a knack. A good memory, maybe. They didn't know that when June was 17, a letter had come to the house with a college seal pressed into the paper. A scholarship. For numbers. A man in a gray suit had driven all the way out from the state school to sit at their kitchen table and tell Della Hollis that her daughter had a mind that came along maybe once in a county. That letter was folded now, in the bottom of June's dresser drawer, under a hymnal and a pair of gloves she never wore. She had folded it the same week her mother fell. Della Hollis had gone down on the back step with a basket of wash in her arms. Something in her hip, the doctor said, and then something in her blood, and then a long list of things June didn't have words for. Now Della lay in the front room most of the day, propped on pillows, her hands too weak to snap a bean. She was still sharp in the eyes. She was still June's whole heart. But the doctoring had a price, and the price had a number, and June carried that number everywhere she went. $840. That was the county hospital bill, 60 days to settle it before it went to collection, and everybody in Cutbank knew who owned the collection company. Same man who owned half the county. Harlan Prewitt. So June carried trays. She smiled at the boys who called her honey. She said thank you kindly to the men who tipped her a nickel and folded $1 for themselves. She did the whole diner's math in her head and the whole family's weight on her back, and she never once complained where a soul could hear her. She just set the trays down level. That was her one small dignity. However her day went, she set every tray down perfectly level, so nothing on it ever slid. Race weekends were the busy ones. The Piedmont short track circuit ran a feature most Saturdays that summer, over at the county fairgrounds, and the drivers and their crews came through Cutbank on their way. Prewitt Motors ran a car. Harlan sponsored it, and the whole town knew the paint scheme, a mean red number with white on the doors, and everybody knew the boy who drove it. Clay Ardmore. The girls came to the Starlight just to watch him drink a cola. He was the kind of good-looking that made grown women forget their coffee, and he had that easy way about him, the way of a man who'd never once had a door shut in his face. He'd pull his own car into the lot, some low black thing, and he'd tip his hat to the Carhops, and the whole row of parked cars would go quiet watching him. June served him like she served anybody. Level tray. Quiet total. Thank you kindly. It was a Friday, the first race weekend of the season, when he noticed her. A crowd of his crewmen had come in ahead of him, greasy and loud, and they'd stacked up an order 6 cars deep, all of it shouted at once, through rolled-down windows. June stood in the middle of the lot, and took it. She didn't write a word. When the cook leaned out the window to ask her to say it back, she said the whole thing off, every plate, and then she said the total. $19.40, she said. Before you ring it. The cook rang it. $19.40. Clay Ardmore was leaning against the fender of his black car with a cola sweating in his hand, and he watched all of that happen, and something in his face changed. It wasn't the look the other men gave her. She knew that look, and she'd learned to step around it. This was different. He looked at her the way a man looks at a thing he can't quite figure. He came back the next night. And the night after that. She thought at first he was like the rest of them, working up his nerve. But he never did the thing the others did. He didn't call her honey. He didn't ask what time she got off. He asked her numbers. Say I got 14 men, he said one night, leaning at the counter where she was stacking clean cups, and I want to buy every one of them a plate and a cola and a slice of pie, and the plate's 90 cents, the cola's a dime, the pie's a quarter. What do I owe you? June didn't even set the cups down. $17.50, she said. You want me to figure the tax, or you paying cash? He grinned like she'd handed him something. How'd you do that so fast? Same way you take a corner without thinking about it, she said. You just do it enough. Your hands know before your head does. That was more words than she usually gave a customer. She caught herself and turned back to the cups. He was quiet a second. Then he said, Hollis. She stopped. That's your name, he said. June Hollis. It's on the order pad. I looked. Most men wouldn't have bothered to learn it. Most men called every Carhop the same 3 names. June felt something go warm and then go careful in her chest, both at once, the way you feel when you find money and know it isn't yours. That's right, she said, and left it there. He came back every race weekend after. He'd test her with figures, and she'd never miss, and each time she gave a little more back, and each time she told herself to give less. Because June Hollis knew exactly what she was. She was a tray girl. And Clay Ardmore was a sponsor's golden boy, with his name painted on a car door, and in Cutbank, Georgia, in the summer of 1964. Those 2 things did not belong in the same sentence, not at a supper table, not in a lot full of watching cars, not anywhere. It was on one of those weekends that June first saw the nickel. The whole Prewitt crew came in, after a Saturday practice, 11 men, hungry and filthy and glad, and she rang their tab. She did it in her head the way she always did, watching each man call his order. Tallying as she went. She had the number long before they were done eating. 26.85. But Prewitt's man came around to settle it. Dorsey Klein was the bookkeeper, a narrow man with ink on his fingers and a permanent squint, the kind who looked at everybody like he was already subtracting them from something. He carried a little adding machine with him everywhere, a heavy thing with a crank, and he ran the crew's tabs on it like he didn't trust the world to add for itself. He cranked out the tape. He told her the total. And the total was a nickel short of the men's own count. June noticed it the way she noticed everything. It just landed. Wrong. The way a false note lands in a hymn. The men had ordered $26.85 worth of food. Dorsey's tape said $26.80. A nickel, gone, somewhere between the ordering and the tape. She opened her mouth. And then she closed it. Because it wasn't her ledger to keep. Because a tray girl who corrects a sponsor's bookkeeper in front of his crew is a tray girl looking for the road. because she had $840 hanging over her mother's bed and 60 days shrinking every night, and she could not afford to be right out loud. So she let it go. She took the money. She said thank you kindly. She set the tray down level and walked away, and she filed that nickel somewhere in the back of her mind where she filed everything, and she thought it was gone. It wasn't gone. Nothing June ever counted was gone. That was her whole trouble. Dorsey Klein had noticed her too, and not the way Clay had. He'd stood there one night and watched her name a tab before he'd finished cranking his machine, and he had not liked it. A Carhop. A girl in an apron, doing in her head what he did with a machine that cost more than her month's pay, and doing it faster. It sat in him like a splinter. You could see it work. He started testing her. Not the friendly way Clay did. He'd rerun a tab out loud after she'd called it. Slow, watching her, like he expected to catch her in a lie. Like a girl couldn't just be quick. There had to be a trick. A cheat. Something she was pulling. Run it again, he'd say, and crank his machine, and read the number off the tape like he was reading a verdict. And every time, the number matched hers. And every time it seemed to make him angrier, not less. It came to a head on the biggest Saturday of the year. The whole circuit was in town. The Starlite lot was full, every stall taken, 40 regulars at least eating in their cars with the windows down and the night warm. The full Prewitt crew was there, all 11 men. And Harlan Prewitt himself had come, which he almost never did, riding in the passenger seat of Clay's black car, with his hat on and his chin up, surveying the lot like a man counting his own cattle. Clay was there too, at the counter, cola in hand, in his easy way. Dorsey saw his moment. A crowd. His boss watching, and that Carhop standing there in her red apron with that little pencil behind her ear she never used, like she was better than a machine. He raised his voice so the lot could hear it. "Tell you what," Dorsey said. "Miss Hollis here's so quick. Let's have a contest." The whole crew's tab, all 11 men, everything they've ordered tonight. Her head against my machine. He patted the adding machine on the counter. Fair and square. Let's see how she does when somebody's checking. The lot got quiet. You could hear the fry basket hissing in the kitchen. 40 cars worth of people leaned toward their windows. June felt the heat come up her neck. She did not want this. This was exactly the thing she'd spent 3 years staying small to avoid. A spectacle. A tray girl made into a sideshow so a jealous man could feel tall. But there was no stepping around it now. Dorsey had put it in front of the whole town, and to refuse looked like guilt, and to accept looked like getting above herself, and there was no square of ground she could stand on that didn't cost her something. So she folded her hands. "Go on and read the orders, then," she said quiet. Dorsey read them. All 11 men, everything they'd had. Plates and colas and shakes and pie and a fish dinner and a double order of rings and coffee for the older men. He read it fast, trying to trip her, and behind him his hand was already on the crank. June didn't watch his hand. She watched nothing at all. She let the numbers fall the way they always fell, quiet, into their places, and it was no harder than breathing. She had the answer before he finished reading. She held it while he read the last 2 items, just to be kind, just so it didn't look like a trick. Dorsey finished. His hand jerked the crank. The machine began to chatter and grind, working its way down the column, tape spooling out. And before the crank had gone half its turns, June said it. $26, she said, and 85 cents. The machine kept grinding. Dorsey couldn't have taken it back if he'd wanted to. The whole lot watched the tape crawl out of that machine, and Dorsey watched it, and the number came up at the bottom in smudged blue ink. 26.85. To the penny. Same as her. For a second, nobody said anything. Then one of the crewmen laughed, big and surprised, and another one whistled, and the sound moved out across the lot, car to car, until 40 people were making the kind of noise a crowd makes when it has seen something it did not expect to see. June didn't feel triumph. She felt naked. She felt every eye in the lot on her, and she felt the pencil behind her ear like it was on fire, and she wanted nothing in the whole world so much as to be back in the kitchen, with her hands full of clean cups where no one was looking. Dorsey's face had gone the color of the tape. And that was when Harlan Prewitt spoke. He didn't get out of the car. He didn't need to. He just leaned his elbow on the door and said it loud enough to carry, in the flat, bored voice of a man reading a price off a tag. "She's a tray girl, Ardmore, a pause, just long enough. Nothing more." He said it to Clay. But he said it to the whole lot, and everybody heard exactly what it meant. Cute trick. Now put the animal back in its stall. The laughter died. The lot went still and awkward, 40 people suddenly finding their food very interesting. Because Harlan Prewitt owned a good many of their notes, and none of them were going to argue with him about a Carhop. June set her jaw and reached for her tray. She had had worse said about her. She could carry this the way she carried everything else. Level, but Clay Ardmore set his cola down on the counter. He set it down slow, and he turned, and he looked at the man who paid his way, the man whose name was on his car door, and for the first time June saw something in Clay's easy face that wasn't easy at all. "She just counted your whole crew," Clay said, "before your clerk found the key to his own machine." He nodded at Dorsey, still frozen over the tape. "Tell me again, Mr. Prewitt, which one of them's the help?" You could have heard a moth land. Nobody talked to Harlan Prewitt that way. Especially not the boy he'd made. And in the middle of that silence June understood, with a cold drop in her stomach, that Clay Ardmore had just planted himself on the same side of the counter as a tray girl, in front of 40 people and 11 crewmen, and the man who owned him. The whole lot saw it. She watched them see it. She watched the looks go around, car to car, quick and knowing. The looks that in a town like Cutbank were the beginning of a story that would follow her the rest of her days. The driver and the Carhop. On the same side. Judging it. Filing it away. Winning that contest had cost her more than losing it ever could. She didn't thank Clay. She didn't look grateful. She looked at him, and her eyes said the thing her mouth couldn't say in front of all those people, which was, "Go away. You've done enough. You don't know what you've just done to me." "You should get back in the car, Mr. Ardmore," she said. Cool, formal, loud enough for the lot. "Your sponsor's waiting." And she picked up her tray, and she set it level, and she carried it into the kitchen, and did not come back out until the black car and everybody in it was long gone down the county road. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't, because Clay Ardmore was not a man who took a hint, and June Hollis was not a woman who could stop noticing things. He kept coming. She kept her distance. She had to. She'd seen the looks in the lot, and she knew what they'd grow into, and she knew that whatever grew, she'd be the one left standing in the ruin of it when he moved on to a life that had rooms she'd never be let into. A driver's name and a tray girl's name did not go in the same sentence. She'd said it to herself so many times it had worn smooth, like the pencil behind her ear. So when he came to the counter, she gave him his total and turned away. When he tried her with a figure, she answered short and found somewhere to be. She was building a wall a nickel at a time, and she was good at it, because building walls was the one thing besides numbers that June Hollis had had years of practice at. But she couldn't stop seeing him. That was the trouble. Her whole gift was seeing what other people missed, and once she started watching Clay Ardmore, she saw everything. She saw that before a feature race, he didn't eat. The others would pack it in, plates and pie and colas, loading up before a long night. Not Clay. Before a race he'd order a cola and let it go warm and untouched, and she was the only one who noticed, because she was the only one who counted what went back to the kitchen uneaten. Nerves, she figured. A man carrying a whole team's hopes on his right foot. He hit it well. But not from her. She never said anything about it. She just started bringing him a plain roll with the warm cola he never drank, sat it down without a word, and walked off. A body ought to have something in it before it drives a car in a circle at 90 miles an hour. That was all. She told herself that was all. And then came the night of the rain. It came up fast the way summer storms do in Georgia, the sky going green and low, and then the rain fell like something dropped. The lot emptied in a hurry, cars pulling out with their wipers going, and June was caught out in the middle of it, chasing down trays before they blew off the window mounts, soaked through in half a minute. She didn't see Clay come across the gravel. She just felt the rain stop hitting her shoulders, and looked up, and he was holding his jacket over the both of them, close, the water running off it in a sheet. "You'll catch your death," he said. "I'll catch worse than that if somebody sees us," she said, and pulled back. But the rain was too hard, and the tray was still in her hands, and there was nowhere to pull back to. He didn't argue. He just took the jacket off his own shoulders and put it around hers, over the wet apron, and it was warm from him, and it smelled like motor oil and something clean underneath. "Give it back," she said. "Come get me next weekend," he said. "I'll be here." And he jogged back to his car through the rain, hatless, grinning like a fool, and drove off. And left her standing in the storm, wearing his jacket with her heart going in a way she couldn't add up no matter how she tried. She wore it home. She hung it on the back of her own door, where her mother could see it. Della Hollis looked at that jacket a long time from her pillows, and then she looked at her daughter, and she didn't say a word, because Della had been young in a small town too, and she knew that some things you can't tell a girl. She has to count the cost herself. That storm was the first honest thing between them. June knew it and hated that she knew it. Because an honest thing, once it starts, is very hard to stop. But the nickel wouldn't leave her alone either. That was the other thing about a mind like June's. It didn't turn off. Once a number went wrong in front of her, it stayed wrong, and it kept being wrong, and it pulled at her the way a loose thread pulls until you have to see where it goes. She'd been ringing the Prewitt crew's tabs all season. Every race weekend, 11 men, and every time, Dorsey's machine came up a little short of the men's real count. Never much. A nickel here, a dime there, small enough that no one man would ever catch it. Small enough to be nothing. But June didn't count one tab. She counted all of them. She held the whole season in her head the way she held a 6-car order, and one slow night, wiping down the counter after close, she let herself run the whole thing out. Every tab, every short, across the weeks. And the loose thread came all the way loose in her hands. It wasn't nothing. It was a pattern. The tabs weren't just short at the counter. They were padded on the crew's own pay. Dorsey was writing the men down for food they'd never ordered, charging it against their wages, and shaving the difference. She ran the men's envelopes against what they'd actually eaten, week over week. And the number came up clean and cold and undeniable. $3 a man. Every week, all season, 11 men. Dorsey Klein was skimming the crew's pay, and not Prewitt's charity money, either. He was skimming Harlan Prewitt's own men, right under Harlan Prewitt's nose, and covering it with padded tabs at a drive-in, betting that no Carhop could ever hold enough of it in her head to see the shape of it. He'd bet wrong. He'd bet against the one person in 3 counties who could. June stood very still behind the counter with the rag in her hand and understood exactly what she was holding. She could prove it. Not with a machine, with her own head. Every figure of it, laid end to end, tight as a hymn. And she understood, right behind that, what proving it would cost. Because proving it meant stepping off her tray and reaching straight into Prewitt's ledger. The one place a girl like her must never, ever put her hand. Harlan Prewitt owned her mother's debt. Harlan Prewitt owned half of Cutbank. A tray girl who crossed him didn't just lose a job, she lost the road and the town and any hope of the 60 days ending any way but bad. She thought about the folded letter in the bottom of her drawer. She thought about the $840. She thought about her mother on the pillows and the jacket on the back of her door, and the men who came in filthy and glad and never knew they were being robbed a plate at a time. She stood there half the night with it. Then Earl came to see her. Earl Suggs was one of the crew, a mechanic, a broad, slow, careful man with kind eyes and grease worn so deep into his knuckles it would never wash out. He'd always been good to June, in a shy, hopeless way she pretended not to see, because Earl was the kind of good man a smart girl was supposed to want, and June couldn't make herself want him, and hated that she couldn't. He came in near close, turning his cap in his hands, and he sat at the counter, and after a while he told her the thing that made up her mind. "Envelope came up short again this week," Earl said, low, like it shamed him to say it. "Third time this month. I ain't the only one. Boys are grumbling, but nobody wants to be the one to call it, on account of it's Mr. Prewitt's money and Mr. Prewitt's man cutting it. You go accusing Dorsey Klein of anything, you're accusing Harlan Prewitt of keeping a thief, and then you're just gone." He shook his head. "We just eat it. Man's got to eat short some weeks." June looked at Earl Suggs's grease-black hands and his tired, kind face and his short envelope, and she felt the last of her careful wall come down inside her, quiet. The way a wall comes down when the ground under it has finally given. She didn't say anything to Earl. She just poured him a coffee he didn't order and didn't charge him for it. That night she didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table with the lamp low so it wouldn't wake her mother, and she didn't write anything down at first, because it was all already there, in the only ledger that had never once been short. Her head. She ran it again from the top. Every tab, every man, every week, every shaved nickel and padded plate, the whole shape of Dorsey Klein's quiet theft laid out clean. And then, because a thing in her head couldn't help anybody but her, she did the thing she had sworn for 3 years she would never do. She reached for a pencil that worked. She reconstructed the whole Prewitt Motors payroll on the back of an old order pad, by lamplight, from memory and the tabs she'd rung all season. The true figures. What each man was owed. What each man got. Where the difference went. She built it the way she'd once meant to build a whole different life, back before the letter went in the drawer. And it came out of her so easy and so complete that she almost cried, because she understood in the middle of it exactly what she'd folded away and buried, and exactly what it had cost her to keep it small. By the time the sky went gray at the window, it was done. Clean, whole, airtight, a thing no machine could dispute, because a machine had already agreed with her once. In front of the whole town. She sat and looked at it a long while. She knew what it was. It wasn't just proof against Dorsey Klein. It was her hand, reaching all the way across the counter and into Harlan Prewitt's ledger, into the one place she'd swore she'd never reach. It was the end of keeping her head down. It was the door of the drawer coming open after 3 years. She folded the pages once, careful, the way she'd folded the scholarship letter. Then she put on her apron, because it was nearly time for the morning shift, and she walked out to the starlight in the wet gray dawn with the pages in her pocket and her heart going like something with its foot on the floor. Clay's black car was already in the lot. He was early. He was always early on the mornings he was leaving town, and he was leaning on the fender the way he'd leaned the first night she ever caught him watching, cola in hand, hat back off his forehead. She walked straight up to him. No wall, no careful distance, no cool formal voice for the lot to hear. "Clay," she said. It was the first time she'd ever used his name. He heard it. She watched him hear it. He straightened up off the fender, and his easy face went still and open, because he knew, the way you know, that whatever came next was not going to be a number he'd asked for. June took the folded pages out of her apron pocket. Her hand was steady. She'd made up her mind somewhere back in the gray hour before dawn, at the kitchen table, over her mother's slow breathing in the next room, and once June Hollis made up her mind about a number, there was no unmaking it. "I need you to look at something," she said, "and I need you to understand that once you've seen it, I can't take it back. Neither of us can." She held the pages out across the space between them, across the whole gulf of it, the Tray Girl and the Golden Boy, and the morning was very quiet, and somewhere behind the kitchen window, Dorsey Cline's adding machine sat cold and unaware of what a girl had done all night, with nothing but her head and a working pencil. Clay looked at her hand. He didn't take the pages yet. "June," he said. "Careful. What is this?" And June Hollis, Tray Girl, kept her arm level and steady in the gray light, and did not answer him yet. "What is this?" he said again. "It's your cruise pay," June said. "The real numbers. Not the ones on Dorsey Cline's tape." Clay took the pages then. He had to. A man doesn't leave a hand hanging in the air like that. Not a hand that steady. He read the first line. His mouth moved a little, the way a man's does when he's checking a figure against the one already in his head. Then he stopped moving his mouth. He just read. June watched him go still. She watched the easy driver's grin fall clean off his face and something older take its place. $3 a man, she said, low, every week. All season. 11 men. He pads the food tabs to cover the hole so the books balance and nobody looks twice. I rang every one of those tabs myself. I know what the men actually ate. And I know what he wrote down. You did this in your head. I did it at my kitchen table, she said. All night. But yes, in my head first. The tabs were already in there. I just had to lay them next to the truth and see where they didn't touch. Clay looked up at her. The lot was empty and gray around them. The neon dead, the gravel wet, and for a long moment he didn't say a word. You know what this is, he said finally. You know whose books these are. They're Harlan Prewitt's. They're the man who owns the paper on your mother's bill. $840, June said. 60 days. I know exactly whose paper it is, Clay. That's why I stayed up all night deciding whether to hand it to you. I've had it done since 2 o'clock in the morning. I stood at that table until the sky went gray, holding it, not knowing if I was brave or just a fool. He folded the pages. Careful, like they might tear. You're not a fool, he said. Then help me not be one. They worked it in secret after that. Not because either of them said the word secret out loud. Because they both knew. The nights the crew rolled out and the lot cleared, Clay would come back around the far side of the building, where the light didn't reach, and June would meet him with the cook gone home and the fryers cooling. And they'd sit at the last booth with the pages between them and check her arithmetic against his memory of what the men were owed. He'd race a feature at 90 miles an hour on the Saturday, take the checkered, and then instead of the party he'd drive the black car back to a dark drive-in to add up small money with a Tray Girl. The driver everyone came to see. Bent over a receipt. He shorted Earl Suggs the most, Clay said one of those nights. His finger stopped on a line. Why Earl? Because Earl never counts, June said. The men who count, Dorsey shorts a nickel here, a dime there, small enough they think they miscounted. The men who don't count, he takes the whole 3. Earl's got grease on his hands and trust in his heart, and he never once opened his envelope on the spot. Dorsey knows exactly who he can rob. Clay was quiet. You see people the way you see numbers, he said. You see the whole ledger of a person in about 4 seconds. That's not a compliment most places. It is here. Their hands were on the same page, his covering half a column, hers the other. And there was a moment, the fryers ticking as they cooled, the whole dark building holding its breath. where he turned his hand and it was almost on hers, and the space between closed to nothing at all. He pulled it back. June looked at the page. "You don't have to explain it," she said. "I do, though." "You don't." She kept her eyes down. "I know what your world would make of your hand on mine, Clay. I've known it since the first night you learned my name off the pad. You came back for the numbers. I let you come back for the numbers. That's a thing that can stay in this booth. The other thing can't." He didn't argue. That was the worst of it. He didn't argue. The supper at the Prewitt clubhouse came the next week. June was there. Not as a guest. She was there because the Starlite lent 2 Carhops out to serve the sponsor's table when Prewitt threw a supper, and June's name went on the list because June was fast and June didn't spill. So she carried trays. She carried trays across a long room under a chandelier to a table where Harlan Prewitt sat at the head, and Dorsey Klein sat with his little crank machine put away for once, and Clay Ardmore sat halfway down the polished wood with Vivian Prewitt beside him in blue. June set the plates down level. She'd always set things down level. Vivian was not cruel. That was the thing June carried out of that room and turned over for a long time after. Vivian smiled at her the way you smile at a chair that's been moved into the right place. She said thank you. She meant it, even. She simply could not see June. Not the June who'd counted 11 men before a machine found its crank. She saw the girl with the tray, and the girl with the tray was furniture. And furniture doesn't have a scholarship folded in a drawer under a hymnal and a pair of gloves. Clay didn't look up when June served him. He couldn't. She understood why he couldn't, and it cost her anyway, standing there filling his water glass while a man across the table sketched out his whole future in a voice pitched for the room to hear. "Wedding in the fall," Harlan Prewitt was saying. "Clean season, clean sheet, everything in its column." June set the pitcher down and walked back to the kitchen and did not let her face do anything at all. The ultimatum came after, in Prewitt's study, and June wasn't in the room for it, but Clay told her, because Clay had stopped being able to not tell her things. "Marry Vivian," Clay said. They were in the booth. The pages were between them, and neither of them was looking at the pages. "Keep the ride. Keep the sponsor. Let the books alone." He laughed, once, without any humor in it. He said it just like that. "Let the books alone." Like he knew. Does he know? He knows something's crawling around in his numbers. He doesn't know it's you. But Dorsey knew. Dorsey Klein had watched a tray girl match his machine to the penny in front of 40 regulars and 11 men, and Dorsey Klein was petty, but petty men are not stupid, and he had done the same arithmetic June had, only backward. He'd asked himself who in Cutbank could be inside his tabs, and there was only one person in Cutbank who could hold a whole season of tabs in her head. So Dorsey moved first. He went to Harlan Prewitt, and he did the oldest thing a thief does when the light gets close. He pointed at somebody else. "The tray girl's been skimming," Dorsey said. He said it in front of the crew. He said it loud, in the shed, with 14 men in earshot and grease on the floor. "That's where your money's been going, Mr. Prewitt." She rings the tabs. She's been padding them and pocketing the difference and blaming the ledger. Ask her. Ask that girl who's so quick with a figure. Quick's another word for slippery. And it stuck. Because that's the thing about a lie told about a person with no standing. It doesn't have to be good. It only has to land somewhere soft. By the next afternoon it was all over Cutbank that the Carhop at the Starlite had her hand in Prewitt's money. By the next afternoon, Harlan Prewitt's collection office had sent a second notice on Della Hollis's bill. 60 days, shrinking toward nothing, $840 sitting on the kitchen table like a stone. Clay came to the drive-in that night with his jaw set to fight the whole county. "I'll clear it," he said. I'll go to Harlan. I'll show him the pages. You'll lose the ride, June said. I don't care about the ride. You care about the ride. She was calm. She'd been calm since the second notice came, the terrible flat calm of a woman who has already done the math on her own life and found the answer she feared. You care about racing clean, which you can't do off a track, and you can't get on a track without a car, and you can't get a car without Harlan Prewitt. If you walk in there and defend a tray girl over his own clerk, you're finished on this circuit, and then you've thrown your whole life away to keep my name out of the mud, and my name is going in the mud regardless, Clay, because that's what mud is for. It's for people like me. Don't. Take your jacket. She held it out. His jacket, the one he'd put over her shoulders in the lot rain and never asked back. Take it. I can't have it hanging on my door anymore. It's evidence, and it's a lie, and I can't afford either one. He didn't take it. So she laid it on the booth between them, folded, level, the way she set everything down, and she walked out into the storm that had been building all evening and let it break on her head. And she went home to her mother and her stone and her drawer with the folded letter she'd never sent. She thought that was the end of it. She was wrong about that, and June Hollis was almost never wrong about anything, which is maybe why it took her a day and a half to understand what she was going to do. She wrote it all out clean. Not from memory this time. From the pages, checked and rechecked, every figure in a hand no crank machine could argue with, every short envelope named to the man it was stolen from. She wrote Earl Suggs's name and the exact dollars taken from Earl Suggs. $3 a man, every week, all season, 11 men, and under it the sum laid bare. Then she folded the whole thing, and she carried it to Earl himself in the shed. In the daylight, in front of God and the crew. Hold this, she told him. Don't open it. Don't give it to anybody but me. If something happens to me, you give it to a newspaperman and not one soul else. Earl Suggs looked at her with his grease-worn knuckles and his kind, slow face. They're saying you took the money, June. I know what they're saying. I don't believe it. I know you don't. She almost smiled. You never counted your own envelope, Earl. You're the easiest man in the county to rob, and you're the only one in this shed who looked at me today like I was a person. So you hold the pages. All right? He held the pages. And behind her, in June's own dresser drawer at home, under the hymnal and the gloves, the folded scholarship letter had somehow worked its way up to the top. The way a thing does when you've started taking it out to look at it. The Saturday feature was the biggest of the season. The whole circuit came. 40 regulars in their 40 cars in the Starlite lot early, and then the track itself packed to the fence, the grandstand full. The same faces that had watched a tray girl match a machine now come to watch a golden boy take a checkered flag. Clay Ardmore drove the race of his life. He ran it clean. He ran it the way he'd been saying all summer he wanted to run something, just once, with nobody's thumb on the scale, and he came out of the last turn at 90 miles an hour, with the field behind him, and took the flag alone. Victory Lane. The photographers. The flagman with the check ready. Harlan Prewitt already climbing down from the tower with his winner's smile on, and Dorsey Klein at his elbow with the little crank machine. Because there was money to be handed out, and Dorsey never missed a chance to be the man who counted it. The flagman held out the microphone for the winner to say his thank yous. Clay took the microphone. And then, instead of thanking his sponsor, Clay Ardmore pulled a folded set of pages out of his jacket, and June, standing at the rail where the tray girls stood, felt her whole heart stop. Because she knew that hand, and she knew that fold, and she knew he'd copied every figure she'd ever given him. "Before I take this check," Clay said, and his voice went out over the whole grandstand, "I'm going to read you some numbers." Harlan Prewitt's smile didn't move. Not yet. Harlan Prewitt hadn't done the arithmetic yet. Prewitt Motors pit crew, Clay read. 11 men. Every man on this crew is owed $3 a week that never reached his envelope. Every week. All season. He looked up. That's Earl Suggs, 39 weeks, and I'll let you all do that one. That's every man standing behind me with grease on his hands. The crew went still, 11 men, and then the 14 in the shed behind them, going still. Dorsey, Clay said, and he held out the pages, and he held out something else too, June's own reconstructed figures. You've got your machine right there. Why don't you run it? Run my numbers against your tape, same as you did to the tray girl. In front of everybody. Let's see which one of us the machine agrees with. Dorsey Cline's face did a thing June would remember the rest of her life. He didn't want to touch the crank. Everybody could see he didn't want to touch the crank. But 40 regulars were watching, and a grandstand was watching, and 11 men whose money was the number in question were watching, and a man who refuses to check a figure in front of a crowd has already told the crowd the answer. So Dorsey ran the machine. His hand shook on the crank. The tape rolled out. And the sum at the bottom of Dorsey Cline's own machine matched the sum on June Hollis's pages. To the penny. Exactly the way it had matched at the counter. Exactly the way it always matched, because June Hollis had never once in her life been a nickel off. 26.80 at the counter. And now this. The machine agreeing with the girl, one more time, when it mattered most. The crew looked at their own hands. Earl Suggs opened his mouth and closed it. And then one of the men, a young one, said out loud what everybody was doing in their heads. $3. Every week. That's my boy's shoes, Dorsey. That was all it took. One man saying the number out loud, and then they were all saying it, all counting their own short envelopes at last. The whole crew turning like a single body toward the little bookkeeper with the crank machine, and Dorsey Cline backed up into the fence and had nowhere left to stand. Harlan Prewitt had done the arithmetic now. You could see the exact second it landed. His winner's smile came apart in pieces. Because Harlan Prewitt was cornered by the one thing a man like Harlan Prewitt can never buy his way out of, which is his own ledger read aloud in front of every customer he has. He could ruin the tray girl. That was easy. That was cheap. He could not ruin a number that his own clerk's machine had just confirmed in front of the whole circuit. That girl, Harlan started, has been right, Clay said. Every time. Ask your machine. It just told you. And Harlan Prewitt, who treated every person as a line item, looked out at a grandstand that had heard every figure and did the only arithmetic left to him. He weighed his good name against a tray girl's, and for the first time in his life the tray girl's was worth more. Because hers was the true one, and the crowd knew it. There's been, Harlan said, and the words cost him blood, an error in our accounts. The crew will be made whole. This week. And the young lady's name, the Hollis girl, there was no skimming. The error was in this office. He didn't look at Dorsey when he said it. He didn't have to. It was our man's error. Our man's error. Dorsey Cline heard himself handed the whole weight of it, and understood that Harlan Prewitt would clear a tray girl's name in a heartbeat if clearing it saved his own, and there is no lonelier arithmetic in the world than that. Vivian Prewitt found Clay by the toolbox after, when the crowd had thinned. She wasn't crying. Vivian Prewitt was not a woman who made a scene. She'd done her own recalculation, cool and complete, the way her father had taught her to do everything, and she'd arrived at the answer before the race was even over. She set the ring down on the toolbox. Just set it down, level, next to a socket wrench, with no more drama than a woman returning a borrowed dish. "You were never going to marry me," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a figure, checked and found correct. You've been in love with your own honesty all summer, and now you've got a public reason to keep it. She looked, once, toward the rail where June stood. "She's the sharpest person on this property, Clay. My father will hire her before the month's out, because he can't afford not to. He always did know the value of a thing. A small, dry breath. It's the only thing he knows. She walked back toward the clubhouse, and duty released him without a scene, and that was the last time Clay Ardmore ever spoke to Vivian Prewitt. Earl Suggs found June at the rail. He'd gotten his money. $3 a week, all season, come back to him in a lump the boss made good on within the hour. And it should have been the best day of Earl Suggs's kind and easy year. He looked at June, and he looked past her at Clay coming across the infield, and Earl Suggs, who never counted his own envelope, did the one sum he'd been avoiding all summer. "I'd have married you," Earl said. "Plain, no weight on it. You know that. I'd have been good to you and your mama both." "I know it, Earl. He's a better fit for that head of yours than I ever was." He worked his grease-worn knuckles. "A man ought to say the true thing at least once, even when it's the thing that hurts him. You taught me that this summer, June, whether you meant to or not." He nodded, and he stepped back, one step, the exact size of a good man giving up a thing he loved. "Go on." "He's waiting." It cost him. She saw exactly what it cost him, down to the nickel. And she never forgot it. Clay reached the rail. He didn't offer her a rescue. That was the thing June had been most afraid of all summer, that some man with standing would one day offer to lift her up out of the trays like she was a thing that needed lifting, and she'd have hated him for it even while she took it. He didn't do that. "Stay," he said, "not to carry trays. Prewitt Motors needs somebody to run its numbers, and every man on that crew just watched you do in your head what the machine couldn't do at all. Run the books. Run this whole team's money. Nobody in this county is going to skim a nickel from anybody ever again with you in that office." June looked at him. "That's a job offer," she said. "That's the first one." He was almost smiling now, the easy grin coming back, but underneath it something that had never once been easy. "And when you'll have me, not before you're ready, not because you need to, only when you'll have me, I'd like to run them beside you. The numbers. And everything else." And then he reached up, and he took the stub of pencil from behind her ear, the one she'd carried 3 summers and never once used, and he threw it in the dirt. And he clipped a pen there instead. A real pen. "Sign your own name to something," he said. "Just once. Where the whole county can see it." So June Hollis took the corrected payroll, the true one, 11 men made whole, and she signed it at the bottom in her own steady hand as the numbers keeper of Prewitt Motors. And it was the first thing she had ever written in her life where her name was meant to be seen. 1 year later. There is an office in the Prewitt Motors garage with a name on the door, and the name is June Hollis, and the books behind that door are straight for the first time since anyone can remember. Not a nickel off. Not a dime unaccounted. The crew opens their envelopes on the spot now, every man of them, and every man of them counts, and every count comes out right, because the woman who does their money can hold the whole season in her head and does it out loud whenever a man asks. Della Hollis sits on her own front porch in the evenings. The bill is gone. $840, cleared, paid out of the first honest wages her daughter ever earned above a tray, and the 60 days that had loomed like a gallows all summer had come and gone into nothing at all. Della is well enough now to sit in the good chair and watch the road, sharp-eyed as ever, and when Clay's black car turns in, she names it before it's halfway up the drive. Some evenings June drives out to the Starlite. She pulls in the way the cars used to pull in for her, and she waits at the window, and a new girl comes out with a tray hooked over her arm, 17 maybe, quick on her feet, and takes June's order and repeats it back wrong by $19.40 against a ticket that should have read $17.50, and June doesn't correct her. She just leaves enough on the tray to make it right, and a little over, and watches the girl count it and smile, and thinks that somebody ought to teach that one to hold a number in her head. Somebody will. And once, only once, she saw Dorsey Cline. He was sweeping the shop floor. That was the only work Harlan Prewitt would give him after, and it was more than Dorsey deserved. And Dorsey took it because a man who's been read aloud in front of the whole circuit has nowhere else in the county to go. He kept his eyes down when June came through. He'd kept his eyes down for a year. June stopped by the broom. She didn't gloat. She'd never once in her life had to raise her voice to be the sharpest thing in a room, and she wasn't going to start over a man with a broom. She just said it, quiet, in passing, the one dry line she'd been carrying a year to give him. The nickel was always short, Mr. Klein, and she went on into her office, where her name was on the door, and closed it soft behind her, and picked up her pen. Somewhere out past the fence, on a Saturday, a short track engine was warming up to run a race clean. 90 miles an hour and nobody's thumb on the scale, and the sharpest mind in Cutbank, Georgia, was exactly where the world had spent 3 summers telling her she'd never sit. At the desk. With the books. Adding it all up. In her head. And getting it right. She'd carried trays only as long as the world made her. Not one summer longer. Comment the town you're watching from. I'd like to know how far June's story has traveled.